You are on assignment.
Now, a behind-the-scenes look. Hey everybody, I'm Alex Villarreal, and this is On Assignment.
And I'm Philip Alexio, filling in for Imran Siddiqui.
Coming up, Beirut has seen its share of civil strife, but the Lebanese city has undergone a renaissance. We'll get more from our reporter who was there.
The United States avoids the so-called fiscal cliff for now. We'll find out what it all means.
Also spurring talks in Congress, tragic shootings in the U.S. reignite the gun control debate.
And we'll follow one of our VOA reporters as she goes on assignment underwater. Let's go.
2012 was a tumultuous year in the Middle East. In the war in Syria, new estimates suggest at least 60,000 people have died since the conflict began in early 2011.
Lebanon's capital, Beirut, has seen the same kind of internal strife. 15 years of civil war left Beirut a bombed-out, pockmarked city in the early 1990s. But some 20 years later, Beirut is back. VOA's correspondent James Brooke talks about the city's renaissance with On Assignment's Doug Bernard.
Damascus 2012? No, this is Beirut 1990. Only 20 years ago, Beirut was in ruins after a long civil war. But the rebirth of Beirut shows how cities can bounce back. Today, Beirut's old Holiday Inn reminds visitors how gun battles once raged along the Green Line that divided Muslim West from Christian East. One generation later, street life is back to normal. Beirut has been largely rebuilt.
James Brooke, you documented a remarkable resurgence that's occurring in Beirut right now. What do you attribute to this city's resilience?
It's partly location. It's a super location overlooking the Eastern Mediterranean. Some people called it the Rio de Janeiro of the Middle East. Lovely corniche is the boulevard that goes alongside the Mediterranean Sea. Sweeping views, fresh air, and nice people when they're not shooting each other. Oliver Martin Robinson, a British analyst here, watches as high-rises sprout up.
There's a big boom in Lebanon of building, and it's been going on for quite a while. This is generally focused on luxury properties, often luxury office space as well in downtown.
If we were to go to Beirut today, is that what we'd really be seeing, like a modern, Western-looking city?
Doug, yes, it was a real shock for me. It was my first trip to Beirut, and I carried in my head all the images of the war and the destruction and the shell-pocked buildings. When I got there, I was just swept away. There's been a huge amount of reconstruction, new shops, new high-rises, and it keeps going. You could say the city bird is the building crane.
So with fewer of these physical scars remaining, not so many of the buildings with the bullet holes and then that sort of thing, are memories starting to fade as well about what happened just several decades ago?
I think memories are starting to fade. The Lebanese are very agile, very entrepreneurial. They've got a knack for bouncing back. And once again, we outsiders, we carry in our heads the images of 15 years of civil war, but the Civil War was over 20 years ago in 1990, a generation ago. So the time has moved on.
So now this is a place that's, seen human habitation for thousands of years. If I were to walk the streets of Beirut, how much of evidence do I see of those many thousands of years of human activity there?
Well, in some cases, the destruction unveiled, in the case of downtown, a Roman bath that goes back 2,000 years. In other cases, the rebuilding has been so fast. I did a Walk Beirut tour, and our guide deliberately sought out these wonderful old buildings, but they're few and far between. Ronnie Chata leads Walk Beirut, a city tour. He has a hard time finding buildings from the Ottoman and French colonial periods of a century ago.
There are pockets within Beirut. They're called traditional quarters. There's some belated preservation. There isn't much of it. I think reconstruction, or at least redevelopment, took precedence over restoration. And I think at a loss to Beirut's history, or at least its architectural history.
So what kind of buildings are going up? I mean, are these shops, are these businesses, are these apartments? And who's behind all this?
Well, a lot of them are high-rise offices and apartment buildings, and they're built for what they call the Gulfies, the people from the Persian Gulf who have a lot of money. The Gulfies really just come in and spend money, and so it's rather bizarre. You see all these ultra high-end shops that the average American or Lebanese could not really go into and buy anything, and they're really designed for this very high-end tourism coming up from the Emirate States, which is not happening now. The problem this season is because of the violence in Syria and a little bit of violence spilling over into Lebanon, the Gulfies are not coming. So when I was there, I had the hotel pool all to myself. The shops were empty. Shops were actually closing. But there are hotels and condos and apartments that are filling up. So there's a lot of life there.
Our thanks again to our Moscow correspondent James Brooke, who talked to us from our VOA bureau in New York.
We're taking a break, but when we come back, a look at the political and global implications of the ongoing budget fight here in Washington. You're watching On Assignment. On January 1st, the United States was set to go over the so-called fiscal cliff, a set of predetermined legislative tax hikes and budget cuts that some say could have plunged the U.S. back into a recession. Congress managed at the last moment to delay that scenario, but more battles between the White House and Congress over spending and taxes are expected soon. And here to help us make sense of all of this is VOA national correspondent Jim Malone. Jim, first of all, we keep talking about this so-called fiscal cliff. Basically, what does it actually mean?
Well, it meant that unless Congress acted, taxes for everyone were going to go up, and some severe government budget cuts were going to go into place. Now, those budget cuts have been put off just for 2 months now, and taxes went up only on the very wealthy. That's something President Obama had campaigned for during the campaign. He got his way. So on taxes, the Democrats won a victory. They had some increases for the wealthy, but now all the focus will be on spending cuts, and we have several more opportunities for those battles to be fought.
Well, but we keep hearing, though, that the Democrats, the president, wants yet even more taxes. Is that correct?
They do want more, at least, tax breaks removed, especially again for wealthy.
Removed.
Yeah, but look, this is the underlying battle for this administration. It was in the first term, will continue to be in the second. Both sides are looking at spending cuts, where to make them, but neither side is willing to put up the specific cuts right now because they're afraid of the political consequences. The side that goes first will get a lot of heat from special interest groups who don't want their special interest cut.
Well, but those cuts are going to either come from, as I understand it, defense, Medicare, and Social Security. Are those the ones that nobody wants to touch?
Well, you've hit on what we call the entitlement programs. They fund pensions, they fund health care for older Americans, and health care for poor Americans, Medicaid. These are huge money-eating programs that are very popular, so voters are very wary of any deep changes, and that's why neither party wants to go first proposing something specific. But in the end, they're going to have to at least start to look at these programs if they're going to make any serious cuts for years to come.
Well, the United States is operating under a temporary legislative measure at the moment. So when does that expire, and when it does, what would happen after that?
Well, look, you've got a couple of things coming to bear here. The government soon will have to try to raise the debt ceiling so they can borrow more money to pay their bills. The 2-month delay will run up in March about these government cuts we talked about. They're going to have to deal with that, or those cuts go into effect. And the temporary spending measure that was put in place for the government to keep running last year, it runs out in March. So we're going to have more battles to come. The president may have won the first round, but it's unclear now heading in where both sides stand.
Now, there was a government shutdown back in 1995. What did that do, and is it possible that it could happen again, and what would that mean?
Republicans did not fare well from that government shutdown. Bill Clinton and the president had the upper hand. This time, though, some Republicans are again talking, especially in the House of Representatives. They might want to force a shutdown. Their hope would be to force the administration into spending cuts. Otherwise, the government would shut down indefinitely.
All right, VOA national correspondent Jim Malone. We're taking another break now. Still to come, the heightened controversy over guns in America. You're watching On Assignment.
A deadly school shooting in the U.S. has renewed the gun debate here. The 20-year-old shooter in Newton, Connecticut killed 6 adults and 20 children under the age of 8 before killing himself.
U.S. gun ownership is a constitutionally protected right, and most Americans can easily buy weapons like the ones Adam Lanza used at Sandy Hook Elementary School.
But many people want to see the laws changed. I spoke with VOA Senate correspondent Michael Bowman about the controversy and the event that has reignited it.
The killer, identified as 20-year-old Adam Lanza, apparently obtained his weapons from the home of his mother, whom he also shot dead before driving in her car to the school. Connecticut State Police spokesman Paul Vance says Lanza forced his way into the building.
We have established a point of entry. I can tell you, it's believed he was not voluntarily let into the school at all, that he forced his way into the school, but that's as far as we can go on that.
There's obviously no disagreement among officials about the magnitude of this tragedy, but there has been disagreement in terms of how to deal with it. Can you tell us about that?
Well, in the immediate aftermath of this, we had a huge outpouring, obviously, of sorrow and anger over this incident. And President Obama spoke out, and many members of Congress spoke out. In fact, I think all members of Congress at one point or another spoke out on this. There was universal agreement, of course, that events like that, tragedies like that, are unacceptable. How to prevent them remains and has been for decades a point of contention. There are those who believe that we need to restrict access to certain kinds of weapons, particularly these assault weapons, these high-powered weapons that sometimes come with magazine clips that can hold dozens and dozens and dozens of rounds. But then there are those who say that no, it's not the fault of the weapons themselves, it's the fault of the people who use them. And that has been a debate that's been going on in this country for quite some time.
There has been one major power player in this debate. Can you talk to us about who these people are?
The National Rifle Association, known as the NRA, they are the largest gun rights lobbying group. And they cling to the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which says that the American people have the right to bear arms. It doesn't say very much beyond that, but that the American people have the right to bear arms. For years, they are considered an extremely powerful lobby, and for years, politicians have proposed gun control at their political peril, knowing that the National Rifle Association, with millions of dollars at its disposal, can mount campaigns to defeat any member of Congress who dares to speak out in favor of gun control. And that's in fact what happened. The United States had an assault weapons ban that was put in place during the Clinton administration. It expired. When it expired, there were lawmakers who said, let's put it back into place. A lot of those lawmakers aren't in Congress anymore, and the NRA, it's not the only reason why, but it's one of the factors.
Now, you talk about this assault weapons ban that expired in 2004. President Obama has called on Congress to reinstate the ban. How likely is it that we'll see that?
I spoke a moment ago of the power of the NRA. Their power was considered so large that many Democrats who favored gun control were afraid to speak out. They had official positions on their websites that they favored gun control, but they didn't actually advocate for it in public. I believe that the calculus has changed. I believe that this incident at Sandy Hook was so shocking that the calculus around gun control has changed.
I also think it's interesting to look at the United States in terms of the global perspective. And so how does the U.S. rank in terms of gun control laws globally?
Well, compared to other advanced industrialized nations, I think it's fair to say that much of the United States is like the Wild West. There are very few controls on the kinds of weapons that one can own. There are limitations in terms of when you purchase a gun, that there has to be a background check and there's a delay, but there are ways to get around that. You can go to a gun show and you can buy almost anything that you want and walk out with a weapon that very day. There are many countries, Canada to our north, where almost no one has guns. I think that under certain conditions you have to get a permit, and it might be for hunting or some such thing. But there are more guns in this country, privately owned guns in this country, than we have adults in this country. That simply does not exist in any other major industrialized nation.
All right, and again, that was VOA Senate correspondent Michael Bowman. Now, as we begin the new year, it's with regret that we say goodbye to longtime VOA VJ Zulema Palacio, who has hung up her reporting gear for retirement.
Well, Zuli covered environmental stories for the Voice of America. She is also an accomplished scuba diver, taking her camera into the deep on numerous occasions, including her wedding.
I sat down with Zuli before she left us to talk about some of the underwater videos she shot while at VOA, covering everything from dolphins to monk seals to a sunken ship. Let's take a look.
Dolphins are so beautiful. You know, just the touch, they are solid muscle and they are so beautiful. Oh, wow. And they always seem to be smiling at you.
Yes,
they look at
they
you.
Do. They look very happy.
They are incredibly curious. So I had a beautiful experience with one of them. We were in Honduras and they had some dolphins, and every afternoon, to interact with the tourists, every afternoon the trainer will take 3 or 4 of the dolphins into the wild. They will just open the gates. He will go in a small boat and go scuba diving with them, with the dolphins. They could go on the wild, in the open ocean, and never come back. But they will come back with him every day. And so I went with him diving, and the experience was just phenomenal. Number one, because the dolphins were very curious. One of them in particular was curious about my camera. And I had this big camera, it's a metal housing where you put your camera inside. And it's got a big dome. Well, the dolphin was reflecting himself in the dome. So he goes like this, and he's looking, and I'm thinking, how cute, he's looking at me. No, he was looking at his own reflection in the dome, and it was very funny. But the nicest thing was actually to see the dolphins interacting underwater with the trainer. They were following his hand for petting, like when you see a puppy around his master, that it was playful around and like, love me, hug me, here, pet me, and it was beautiful. So I started the story saying, are dolphins capable of loving? And I believe they are.
Yeah, well, after that experience,
yeah,
I mean,
that was nice.
It's hard to not see that. Also, you did a very interesting piece as well on monk seals, Hawaiian monk seals. What was it like interacting with them?
Phenomenal. They are in the last west part of the United States. After Hawaii finished, there is one little teeny island called the Forbidden Island. There are only a few left in the planet.
Monk seals are the most endangered marine mammal we have in the United States. So there's a lot of concern about making sure that they'll be around for future generations to see. But from what biologists are saying, we may only have 12 to 15 years to enjoy them.
I got to this monk seal that kept kind of hiding behind the rocks to look at me or not to look at me.
Peekaboo.
Well, peekaboo. And then realized that the big camera that I had with me did not allow him to see my face. So I realized that. Then I lowered the camera and then made eye contact with him. And he goes like, oh, it's you. Okay. And then he went on and did all sorts of dances in front of me. And I was delighted because I was taking the video with him. And it was just beautiful. They are very curious and very gracious, very, very beautiful.
This shipwreck story that you did, I found that to be a very interesting piece of yours as well. The fact that it's not ships that have sunk on their own. This is actually something that's being done for environmental purposes.
And they do it environmentally. So they clean up the ship completely from any toxic paints or materials. They take any oil and all the tubes that have contained oil, they clean it up so well, And then they make big windows so animals and people can get in and out without getting trapped.
The C-53 was placed here in an attempt to divert divers away from the delicate and more fragile natural coral reef and to create a new artificial coral reef in Cozumel National Marine Park. Elvira Carvajal is the park director.
We estimate that we have around 1,500 scuba divers a day. The idea was that at least one day that a diver does not dive into the natural coral reef, we are relieving it from kicking, sand, hitting, and so on.
Reefing vessels such as this one is part of a worldwide trend. The vessel provides recreation for divers and helps create artificial coral reefs.
There is a whole family of lobsters down there. So you go there and they all go on with the antennas. Hey, who is there? But I'm talking about dozens of them. It's very funny.
Was that all scary for you to be inside this ship and it's dark down there?
Yes, it was scary for me because I was filming, and in order for me to get the video of the people coming into the ship and going through the inside of the ship, I had to be inside first. Now remember, there are many animals there that can be big or small. That part was scary. It was like, is there anybody in there?
Oh yes, I know.
And I don't know, maybe I did have some company and I never knew.
It's better that you didn't know. And Phil, you know, Zuli Palacio, she is actually not the only VOA producer who has just left us for other pastures. Our radio TV reporter, Susan Logue, also leaving.
Well, Susan specialized in reports on the arts and the Native American community, and last year she filed a report on an arts endeavor called Vocal Trash.
Vocal Trash is an ensemble that performs pop tunes on instruments made out of, well, you guessed it, trash. It gives some weight to the famous saying, one person's trash is another's treasure. So let's take a look at that report that Susan filed in 2012.
My name is Steve Linder. I am a creator and co-owner of Vocal Trash.
My name is Kelsey Ray, and I'm the co-owner of Vocal Trash. We were singers first, and so we put together the name Vocal Trash. I can't stop this beating deep inside of me. What we're doing is taking old classics and kind of giving them a redo, and you know, recycling old classics and giving them an urban kind of a hip-hop feel.
We're gonna play some trash cans
and water bottles,
and barrels,
buckets, brooms, lids, anything you can recycle, we make music out of.
Well, my partner and I looked at each other and thought, why not be a group with a message? And that's when we came up with Think Before You Throw It Away. We like to say we rescue items from a landfill and make music out of them.
You can't help but see the instruments and get the message out of what we're doing.
Think before you throw it away. Recycle. So we won't get you alone. Stand all across the land. Recycle.
Two very talented reporters, right, Phil?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good.
Susan Logue and Zuli Palacio, we will definitely miss them, but we wish them well.
Well, we've come to the end of our show, so join us next week for a special look at the second inauguration of President Barack Obama.
We'll go inside the White House with our correspondents there and explore the history of U.S. inaugurals.
In the meantime, you can see every episode of On Assignment at voanews.com and on Facebook and YouTube.
Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time.